Folks, this wash manenos. Now the latest is that blogger Edgar Obare, the man who broke this story, is now telling us that his brother alitekwa nyara, this past weekend and later released. Now, those people who took him just wanted to know where Bwana Edgar Obare was. Clearly, Bwana Obare is lying low. And this wash manenos continues to be a mystery to most Kenyans. From comments I've seen on social media, most Kenyans don't understand. Indeed, they're nowhere near understanding what they're dealing with here. Imagine one Kenyan is telling Edgar Obare to shut up. Now, that was of great interest to me, because I started wondering if it was in fact a coded message from the Wash High Command. Now, there's something we need to understand. It is in the best interest of these Wash people that this story goes away, that things quieten down, so that they can continue with the operations. The last thing they want is an expose. And I'm going to explain why in great detail in a moment. But first, allow me to give you an illustration that is very relevant to what we're faced with here. Now, those of you who have watched action movies and TV series like 24, although that is old school, but all of them, most of you will remember a scene where one of the criminals is caught up with, and they confess, this thing is much bigger than me. That is precisely what we're dealing with in this instance. By the way, I hope most of us caught up with The Godfather. The book, if you can find it, but I know most of us don't read. Most of us are pressed for time. Therefore, the movie, in my view, is much more convenient. And I remind you, because it is critical, if you have to understand what is really going down here, and how harmful it is to the country called Kenya. And most importantly, how difficult it is to finish this thing. Mario Puzo's classic, The Godfather, is ideal for anybody who wants to truly grasp what we're faced with here. Anyway, if you missed it, there's another quick way that we can understand all this. You see, the country called Kenya had its very own Don Corleone, Godfather. Yep, right here in Kenya. And his story, which I've told before on this channel, is extremely instructive. I'm talking about a man who was called Ibrahim Akasha. Now, many Kenyans will remember that last year, the sons of this man, the Akasha brothers, were arraigned in court all the way in New York, the United States of America. I'm talking about the father of those Akasha brothers who are now behind bars in the United States. Many Kenyans are not aware that the senior Akasha, Ibrahim Akasha, was one of the chief financiers, wait for this one, of the campaign of former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi in 1992. Those were the first multi-party elections in Kenya. Since the 60s, the days of Kanu and Kadu, in 1992, Moi was in trouble. We had a very popular opposition. And the mantra in those days was Moi must go. You see, I want you to understand that even powerful politicians are often terrified of these wash people. Yep, and I will tell you why. There is a place in Nairobi called Park Road, and it is sandwiched between Kariakor, Pangani, and railway staff quarters. It is in a place called Ngara. And some of these wash operatives are based there. Of course, the ones who are very low down in the food chain. Also at Park Road are all kinds of criminals, hackers, small-time conmen, etc., etc. But there's also another group of criminals situated in this place. Let me just call them fixers. And so the wash guys have a problem. There's an obstacle that has to be dealt with. Yeah? Who do you think they'll go to? They'll go to the neighboring fixers who are within the community at this place. And of course, fixers the world over can be violent if they have to. If they have to be violent to fix a problem. I think you get my gist. Most politicians have this information. And those who have it, they would be terrified of crossing the wash people, messing up with them in any way. So back to the story of Ibrahim Akasha Sr. In a nutshell, Ibrahim Akasha Sr. was brought down because of a careless mistake he made. And this mistake he made alarmed some very powerful people in government who made a decision to finish him. And organized crime, cartels, are not easy to deal with. But the way they brought Akasha down was simply by exposing him, making his story headlines in the media. You see, before Akasha was exposed, he was operating chini ya maji, in the shadows. Nobody knew who he was. And yet he was one of the most powerful people in Kenya. Yes. Publicity is the last thing this kind of people want. Let me put it another way. The only way you can finish a cartel is first of all to bring them out into the open. So that people know that is so and so. And in Akasha's case, it was even worse because he was the leader, the founder and the leader of the very first narcotics cartel in Kenya. Just listening to this recording I made last year, that explains this in great detail and gives you the story of Akasha, which is a movie. Oh yes. Let's listen in. The father to Ibrahim Akasha Sr. came to Kenya through the Sudan. He was a Palestinian, and he came into Kenya during the colonial times. We're talking about the 50s. And it is not clear why he came in through Sudan. Probably he passed there, tried to do some business, it didn't work or something like that. But finally, he decided to settle in Kenya with his family after living all his adult life in Iraq. And he settled at the coast, Mombasa. Now, Ibrahim Akasha Sr. was one of his sons, and he excelled in business. He set up a transport business, Akasha Transport. And the business prospered very quickly and became huge. And later Akasha sold this business to the government of Kenya. Now that business is still in existence today, and it's called Kenatco. After selling off Kenatco, Akasha Sr., Ibrahim Akasha, became an arms dealer. Started supplying guns. And there was all kinds of warfare going on all over the region, and that business also prospered. Now, of course, there's no way you can do such a business without very powerful connections, right inside government. But then something went wrong. He started getting competitors. Some people got greedy, and he was forced out of this business. And so he decided to go into drugs. And so he revived Akasha Transport. But this time, Akasha Transport was just a cover. And indeed, it was the perfect cover. Because with a transport company in Mombasa, you have links to the port, where you collect your consignment of drugs hidden inside furniture or something like that. And then you're also able to transport it all over the country, without detection. And Ibrahim Akasha became very wealthy, stinking wealthy, and very powerful. But he remained very careful and invisible. And of course his contacts within the highest level of the Kenyan government remained. And in fact grew and spread all over the place until he became one of the most powerful people in the country by far, even when there were very few people in the country who had ever heard of the name Akasha, let alone knowing how powerful he was. In 1992, wait for this one, he was the main financier by far, of President Daniel Toroitich arap Moi's campaign for the presidency. You remember 1992 was the first multi-party elections in Kenya since 1963, and there was a very vibrant and popular opposition, and Moi was fighting for survival. Akasha Senior was one of the chief campaign sponsors. He came in handy. He saved the day for Kanu and Moi, and yet his name appeared nowhere. And so he was able to become even more untouchable. And it was at the height of his power that Akasha made his very first fatal mistake. There was an assistant commissioner of police known as Bwana Kalume Chai. He happened to go to the Akasha residency to inquire about a kidnapping, which he was investigating. And what did Akasha do? He kidnapped the cop. This was in 1995. And he held him there for long hours, I think probably to teach him a lesson, so that the cop knows who Akasha is. And he probably guessed in his mind, this was a nobody, this was a small-time cop. And yet he had connections and links to the highest level of government. So he probably thought it was a small thing. However, this single action rubbed some very powerful people the wrong way. And I'm talking about the intelligence community, the people who look after security of the state. It alarmed them. I mean, wouldn't it alarm you? If a private citizen can actually kidnap a senior police officer? To quote a Kamba expression, "Oh, kamono." Loosely translated, he crossed the line. Now, the intelligence community in any country are thinkers, and they plan things very carefully, very meticulously. They will never act out of emotion, And so, to the shock of very many people, in 1996, Akasha was arrested and arraigned in court. Very many people are puzzled why he was arrested. To date, they are still puzzled. I mean, he was so powerful. And they were even more confused when, predictably, the case went nowhere and he was acquitted. Let me explain. The whole idea of arresting him was not even to get him successfully convicted. It was to do a very simple thing, to bring him out in the open, to expose him, so to speak. And that was not a small thing, because as I'll tell you shortly, that was the beginning of the downfall of the Akasha empire. Because for the first time, people now knew there was a drug dealer called Akasha who operated in Mombasa, information that had never been in the public domain before. And according to plan, from that first arrest, the slide downwards for Akasha was swift. Yes, his tentacles were spread all over the judicial system, the police, senior government officials, everybody who mattered. Indeed, it was the same network his sons inherited, and built up the drug business after his death. It is the same network that is going to be exposed and brought down by the DEA shortly. Akasha Senior himself, of course, died in a very dramatic and gory way, very far away from Kenya, in Amsterdam, Holland. It was a hit from one of his associates from a drug deal that went wrong. He was with one of his 3 wives, Hayat, an Egyptian. Some guy just came up to him cycling as he was walking the streets, going to meet the very person who ordered the hit on him. And that cyclist pumped 4 bullets into his head, 2 into his heart, and 1 in the stomach. A total of 7 bullets. And he died there in the streets of Amsterdam, in the arms of his confused and weeping wife. His body was brought back to Kenya and buried in Kenya. and his sons continued in the business. But now it is very clear that the Akasha empire is finished. Now, before I go, there's one very important thing I want you to take note of, which should have been obvious, but let me just say it. It is clear that from Akasha's influence, Akasha Senior, and the fact that he started this business, he was a founder of the drug business in Kenya. Because of those facts, it's very clear that there's no drug deal which could have taken place or which can take place today in East and Central Africa that has got no links to the Akasha family. No way. And this is why the Akashas became of such great interest to the DEA, all the way in America, very far away from Kenya. Because it is common knowledge that the East African coast, and Kenya especially, is a major transit point for drugs that end up in the West. So the DEA strategy is very simple. They're trying to kill the source. Kill the source and the drugs will not arrive in the States. It's as simple as that. Now, dealing with the major transit point is a major issue for Kenya. Why? Because the people involved in this business in Kenya are very, very big untouchable people. At least 2 sitting governors, a former governor, several MPs, the wife of a former president, etc., etc. I think you get my gist. Bringing down these cartels is going to have very far-reaching repercussions right across the country. Wah, wah, wah. I now believe your eyes are opened. And you fully understand why some people would be very determined that this story ends. Things quieten down. And the last thing they want is any kind of publicity. And I hope you also now understand why organized crime in any country, in any part of the world, is always linked to politics. These people finance a lot of politics. Let me just leave it at that. Don't miss my weekly intelligence briefings, especially number 64 and number 65. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.